He had the same look in his eye my brother always had. Probably the only thing my brother ever loved in his whole rotten life was that car. No shitter ever came between him and Christine. If they did, watch out.
From December of 1983 onward, Christine has existed in a strange space between cult horror artifact and pop culture myth, where the lines between mechanical menace and teenage obsession blur under the weight of chrome and blood. This is not a retrospective or a celebration, it's a forensic dissection of the 10 things you were never shown about that car. Number 1. Stephen King didn't reach for a well-known car when writing Christine. Instead, he picked something that had almost vanished from cultural memory, the 1958 Plymouth Fury. By the early 1980s, the Fury wasn't an icon or even a nostalgic favorite, it was simply forgotten. That's exactly what drew King to it. He once said he was looking for the most mundane car of the 1950s, something unremarkable that wouldn't immediately evoke muscle car heroism or vintage flair. Choosing the Fury gave Christine an unsettling realism. This wasn't a flashy Corvette or a menacing Charger. It was a dusty old relic that in King's hands became something dangerous. The 1958 Fury had wide tail fins, deep headlights, and chrome-heavy styling that walked the line between alluring and eerie. It felt out of time, designed to be admired but also vaguely threatening when shown in shadow or firelight. For the film, Carpenter leaned into that design, painting Christine a vivid red with a white roof. Even though original Furies only came in beige, the effect worked. What started as a forgotten model turned into one of the most instantly recognizable horror movie vehicles ever made. Number 2. In Stephen King's novel, the evil behind Christine has a face, a rotting, chain-smoking ghost named Roland LeBay. He's the original owner of the car, and his spirit lives on inside it, warping Arnie Cunningham's mind and dragging him down into madness. But in the movie, there's no LeBay, no ghost riding shotgun, no whispered conversations from beyond the grave. John Carpenter and screenwriter Bill Phillips took a different route. They cut LeBay completely and made Christine herself the villain. No backstory, no haunting, just pure malevolence. From the opening scene on the factory floor, she's already a killer. No explanation needed. The change wasn't just for pacing. It was a deliberate move to avoid the kind of ghostly interactions seen in movies like An American Werewolf in London, where the dead come back to chat with the living. The studio didn't want that. They wanted mystery. So instead of showing Arnie being possessed by LeBay, the film lets Christine's evil speak through shattered windshields, flaming wreckage, and hypnotic headlights. Some fans missed the deeper lore from the book, but the stripped-down approach made Christine feel more unpredictable. She didn't need a backstory. She just needed a road. Number 3. Production on Christine was already underway before most readers ever got their hands on the book. Stephen King's novel hit shelves in April 1983, but Columbia Pictures had secured the rights and started the film's pre-production even earlier that year. By the time the novel was officially released, shooting had already begun in California. Director John Carpenter came on board after another project, Firestarter, fell through, and screenwriter Bill Phillips was brought in to adapt the manuscript directly without waiting for the book's release. The film wrapped up by late spring, and Christine premiered in theaters on December 9, 1983. The entire process, from early development to nationwide release, was compressed into a single year. That tight timeline meant the movie wasn't influenced by fan reactions or critical reviews of the novel. It stood on its own, visually interpreting King's concept in real time. It also meant that some story elements had to be condensed, streamlined, or changed entirely before audiences even knew what had been changed. Christine the car was already killing people on screen before most had a chance to read how she killed in print. Number 4. When Christine opened in theaters, expectations were high. John Carpenter had just come off The Thing, and Stephen King was one of the hottest names in publishing, but the box office numbers didn't match the buzz. The film debuted in 4th place and quickly dropped out of the top 10. It finished its run with about $21 million domestically, decent but underwhelming for a major horror release. Carpenter later called the reception disappointing, and King wasn't thrilled either. It landed during an awkward transition in the horror genre. Slasher films were getting bloodier, faster, and more self-aware. Christine, by contrast, played it straight. Slow burns, quiet dread, long takes. There was no Freddy Krueger-style banter, no buckets of gore. Just a moody story about a car and the boy it consumes. That approach didn't click with teenage audiences hungry for flashier kills. Critics gave it polite praise, but not much fanfare. Over time, though, the film gained traction through late-night cable and video rentals. Today, it's recognized as a cult classic, but in 1983, Christine was considered a near miss. Number 5. The connective thread between Christine and Halloween runs deeper than a shared director or a knack for eerie synth scores, because both films unfold in the same kind of suburban limbo, where sidewalks are cracked, streetlights flicker, and houses sit in silence just a little too long. John Carpenter brought a specific energy to these spaces, turning familiar neighborhoods into arenas of lurking dread, where evil doesn't need explanation or permission to exist. Both films were set in the same year, 1978, even though Christine came out 5 years later, and both were filmed in similar working-class suburbs of Los Angeles, dressed up to pass as anywhere USA. The idea was to take horror out of the castles and swamps and put it right in the viewer's driveway. And once it's there, Carpenter treats evil not as metaphor or drama, but as a raw, silent fact. Michael Myers doesn't talk, doesn't explain, and doesn't react. He walks. Christine doesn't blink, doesn't signal, and doesn't stop. She drives. Both follow the same rhythm. Empty streets, slow pans, headlights, and shadows. You're never invited to understand the killer, only to survive them. In that way, Christine and Halloween feel less like two different films and more like two chapters from the same blood-streaked rulebook. Number 6. The R rating that Christine carried into theaters didn't come from buckets of blood or elaborate death scenes, but from something far more mundane: studio math. Columbia Pictures had decided that in order to grab the right kind of audience, the teenagers who treated horror films like weekend rituals, the movie needed an R slapped on the poster. But Carpenter didn't make a film soaked in gore. Christine moved slowly, leaned into atmosphere, and kept its violence quick, suggestive, and mostly bloodless. That created a strange problem. The MPAA guidelines weren't strict enough to deny it a lower rating, which meant the studio's carefully designed marketing strategy was suddenly in danger. So the filmmakers started tweaking the dialogue, packing scenes with enough profanity to cross the invisible threshold. Characters who might have muttered something mild in earlier drafts were now cursing in rhythm. Carpenter had just made The Thing the year before, one of the most grotesquely violent movies of its time. So the idea that he now had to work harder to offend anyone must have been absurd. But this wasn't about offense. It was about making sure the movie didn't look tame sitting next to Freddy Krueger or Jason Voorhees on a marquee. The final result wasn't any bloodier, but it swore enough to pass the test. Number 7. During Christine's killing scenes, the filmmakers made a deliberate choice to black out the car's windows, a decision that served both practical and creative goals at once. From a production standpoint, the blacked-out glass hid the stunt driver Terry Leonard, who had to navigate some dangerous setups while maintaining the illusion that the car was moving on its own. The idea of a visibly human driver behind the wheel would have undercut everything the movie was trying to build. This wasn't supposed to be a possessed machine in the traditional sense, or an extension of a killer's will. Christine was supposed to be something autonomous. The black windows erased any sign of human control. But beyond the logistical solution, there was a more subtle narrative effect. The obscured windows added to the car's mystique, making her look like a rolling coffin, impenetrable, unreadable, not alive in any traditional way, but certainly not dead either. The viewer is left with an unsettling question in each attack sequence: is Arnie inside, complicit in the murder, or has the car taken full control? That ambiguity sits at the center of Christine's horror. Removing that would have made her just another haunted object. By darkening the windows, the production gave her shape without definition, a physical presence that still defied human understanding. Number 8. Casting Christine wasn't about building a star vehicle. It was about finding the right faces for the story's slow unraveling of identity and control. Carpenter didn't want to fill the screen with people the audience already knew. He wanted actors who felt like they came from the world they were playing in, not like visitors from some parallel universe of fame. Keith Gordon was cast as Arnie Cunningham, the awkward high schooler who changes into something harder, darker, and ultimately consumed. Columbia Pictures had pushed for names: Scott Baio for Arnie, Brooke Shields for Lee Cabot, Kevin Bacon for Dennis, but Carpenter stood firm. Gordon had experience in theater and had appeared in Jaws 2, but he wasn't a star. Alexandra Paul, who played Lee, was 19 and largely unknown. John Stockwell, who took the role of Dennis, had done small film work and later appeared in Top Gun, but at the time was another unfamiliar face. The decision to cast lesser-known actors grounded the film. It gave Arnie's descent into obsession more credibility and kept the film rooted in a believable teenage world. The absence of celebrity created space for the story to take center stage, where a killer car and a crumbling friendship could play out without distraction. Number 9. In the film version of Christine, Will Darnell dies a swift, relatively bloodless death, pinned by Christine's seat in a grim but understated sequence that takes place inside his darkened garage. It's effective in its simplicity, leaving much of the violence off-screen and allowing Carpenter's atmospheric tension to do the heavy lifting. But in Stephen King's original novel, that same death unfolds with considerably more detail, destruction, and brutality. Darnell's home becomes a battleground as Christine barrels through the building itself, crashing through rooms and chasing Darnell up a flight of stairs. There's nowhere to run. The car hits him over and over again, turning him into a broken pile of flesh and bone, in a scene far more grisly than anything the movie dared to attempt. This wasn't just a matter of tone, it reflected the novel's deeper commitment to horror that was both psychological and physical. King's version of the story also gives Darnell a more morally compromised backstory, involving smuggling and illegal schemes, which adds weight to his fate. The book is filled with bleak outcomes like this. Arnie and his mother both die in a car accident unrelated to Christine. The detective who tries to investigate Christine's killings doesn't survive either. By contrast, the movie trims down the carnage and keeps its core characters intact a little longer. Number 10. Some of the most revealing scenes in Christine never made it into the final cut, and in hindsight, the reasons for cutting them had more to do with tone than runtime. One deleted scene shows Dennis and Lee meeting at a burger joint and slipping into a moment of romantic tension. Dennis confesses he wishes he had met her before Arnie did, and Lee agrees. They start kissing. It's quiet, private, and almost tender, but completely out of step with the film's portrayal of the two as loyal friends trying to save someone they both care about. Leaving it in would have shifted the audience's perception, turning Dennis and Leigh into secret lovers who betray Arnie instead of loyal allies caught in a tragedy. That version of the story might have made for more drama, but it would have weakened the emotional clarity. Another extended scene shows Dennis in the passenger seat while Arnie drives like a maniac on New Year's Eve. The longer cut lets the tension build, with Dennis visibly shaken, nearly vomiting, and caught between fear and disbelief as Arnie becomes almost unrecognizable. The line, "Don't get any on the seat, she hates that," becomes even more chilling in context. These scenes were sacrificed for pacing and tonal focus, but they still offer a glimpse into a darker version of Christine that nearly made it to screen.